So today we're going to be talking about some of the ways that we can support faculty in their journey, in particular, leveraging digital communities to bring them together and give them spaces where they can support each other and talk to each other. We also would love to know, who we have in our audience today. So if you have a moment, please introduce yourself in the chat, and you can just let us know where you're from, what role you have, and if there's something in particular that really sparked your interest about this topic, let us know, and we'll make sure that, if you have a particular question or if you're working on a particular initiative, we can weave that into the conversation today. We're also going to be using a cool tool called Slido to do some polling and interaction throughout the session today. So if you have a separate device and can go to slido.com and then enter that number there, and it'll come up again later when we have the polls, then have that ready. And then when those questions come up, you can drop in your thoughts and answers as well. So I am Katie Kapler. I am co-founder and CEO of Inscribe. We're a virtual community platform, and I'll tell you just a little bit about us in a second here. But more importantly, I am joined today by David Des Armier, did I get that right? From the University of Tennessee-Knoxville, but coming in from sunny California today. David, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Katie. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So if you're not familiar with Inscribe, we are, as I said, a virtual community platform. So primarily Inscribe is used as a way to create virtual spaces for students to connect and collaborate and support each other. But I would say through our journey and the work that we've done with institutions across the US, one of the things that they have brought to us is the idea that faculty also need these spaces and benefit from the opportunity to collaborate. And so that's a little bit about, why we're here today, is really recognizing that faculty also have an important need to feel that sense of connection and belonging, that they have a tremendous amount of knowledge that their peers can benefit from and learn from, and that they also require flexibility in terms of how they access information and how they coordinate and collaborate with each other. And so I'm really excited to explore this topic. If it's something that you're thinking about at your school, definitely let us know, or if there's ways that you're solving these problems for your faculty, definitely let us know that in the chat, because we'd love to learn from you as well. But why don't we get started? I'm sure everybody is familiar with the University of Tennessee-Knoxville, but David, if you could just take a minute to tell us a little bit about the institution, a little bit about the makeup and your role and how you fit into that organization.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Yeah, so at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, we're a public research university. We've been around for a long time, of course. We have a diverse student population. We have over 2,000 plus faculty. Within our unit, we are digital learning, and we have more than 70 fully online academic programs. And within digital learning, we are dedicated to helping instructional faculty, program directors, academic administrators help plan and implement, good quality online educational programs for all. And so that's really kind of our goal. And so at the University of Tennessee-Knoxville, we are a flagship campus, and we have campuses smaller campuses throughout the university, or throughout Tennessee as well.
Awesome. So big institution, lots of faculty. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people can resonates with a lot of individuals. And so,
right.
Keeping those individuals connected and communicating with them can be challenging. Curious from the audience, for those of you that are working with faculty, or, I suppose we all in some way have the opportunity to collaborate with faculty. What is one of the challenges that you think about when, we have students here, but I'm going to change that. So what is one of the things that you think about in terms of supporting faculty who are teaching online or teaching non-traditional students? What are some of the things that you see among your faculty population? So just drop in your thoughts, and hopefully they will pop in as they come up. I wonder if my internet is feeling a little bit sad right now. Well, David, what do you think about when you hear this word? Like, if you just had to throw out like 3 words that come to mind when you think about supporting faculty, what do you think about?
I think for us, it's trying to think about ways to increase a community of learners, which would be our instructional faculty, anyone working with us, all things related to online learning. And so getting your message across is incredibly challenging, especially
Yeah.
at a university such as ours. We're a flagship. We've got increasingly mobile staff and faculty, and most of the faculty that I work with don't even really live on the Knoxville campus. So I think it's, as we're seeing the word cloud here, things we don't want to avoid is disengagement, right? We want to find ways to engage. We know that there may be limited resources out there. We know they're busy, right? We all know these things. And so for us, we really wanted to meet those challenges. And so we were trying to figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the words I hear a lot, which I don't see up here, but I maybe with the buy-in piece is overwhelmed. I think a lot of times what we hear in particular is just there's so many things coming at them and there's so much change all the time. It's like, how do they stay on top of that, do their job, do all the things that they're being
Hmm.
asked to do, and still have a smile on their face, and still have time for their students. So absolutely appreciate that. Thank you everybody for your contributions. And you started to touch on this a little bit.
Cool.
So thinking
Hmm.
about ways to keep people connected. And here's some of
Yeah.
the challenges that we talked about. Do you want to just kind of walk us through each of these in terms of how you were seeing them manifest on your campus or at your campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like kind of what led us here in the first place is, we have been a unit, a fairly new unit, but we've always stayed true to the digital learning, online learning space. And so we tried to use social networks in the past. We had used Twitter, and we found that it really wasn't meeting our expectations. Using Twitter we found it wasn't really engaging. We found that they weren't connecting. There was really no community. So we noticed also there was no comments or even reactions. And so we thought, how can we communicate this in a way where, we can communicate change? Change is a constant in our units. I have been here, for about a year now, and we've changed our name 3 times, and how do we communicate those changes that happen so rapidly? And so for us, whether it's communicating innovative technologies, I mean, there's always new technologies coming out. So we have realized that at the pace of change, how can we communicate this in a fashion that, isn't going to be just like a newsletter or a quick email spam, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think pace of change is just a constant. So knowing that, I think creating a online community can really help with that. So
Right.
faculty know, oh, change is on the horizon, right?
Yep.
And how we can implement that. I would
And
say
then I was
isolation from
just going to add
peers. Oh,
one
go ahead.
thing
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
which is I feel like also what we see in some student communities is just have if even when things are tough and overwhelming, just to know that other people are also feeling that way, can be reassuring. So even though you can't change the fact that or you can't stop the pace of change, but you can
That's right.
reflect on that, together.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's kind of what we wanted as a community. Yeah, to springboard that. I think from isolation from peers, one thing we have to realize as a faculty service unit is that students aren't the only ones that are seeking engagement and support. And we always, we want to practice what we preach. If we're telling faculty, build online community, build support. And so we want to model that to them as well. And so we're hoping that faculty won't find themselves so isolated, and that this community that we're trying to build, they can feel more connected and feel more belonged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Do you want to
And then I would,
then
oh, mhm, mhm,
talk to us a little bit about how you define what a digital community is?
mhm.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, to me, thinking of a digital community, we're really think of it as a space for faculty and anyone who's interested to connect in a digital environment. And so, thinking like what you have here, thinking of digital spaces as a way to connect. Since we don't have that physical connection, we have transactional distance now. And so hopefully with that digital community, we can communicate. And also I think safety is key, as you see on the slide. We want a safe place where faculty can ask really hard, difficult questions, right? Where we can share success stories. We can even share non-success stories and learn from that and learn from that experience, right? And then I think knowledge repository too is another way we want to share. We want to get our resources out there. As I mentioned before, it's incredibly hard to share everything. We do have newsletters. We do try to communicate as best as we can, but I feel like with a knowledge repository such as Inscribe, we can better facilitate that process.
Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of folks like in the teaching and learning organizations where they will essentially use like a website as the knowledge repository. And it's great for putting out information, but it's very one directional, right? So
Yeah,
if
good
somebody has
point.
a follow-up question or they're like, hey, I tried this and it's not working for me, there's not really an easy way for them to have that conversation. So I love
Yeah.
that idea of making it more collaborative. And to your point, if you are trying something, a new learning approach or methodology or tool, just being able to share with your peers what you've done, and maybe they can learn from that. We shouldn't all have to start from ground zero every time we're trying to do something. And so being able to build on each other's work, I think, is just such a beautiful idea for the faculty.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about how you guys are really using communities on campus today or among your faculty today. Talk a little bit about how you've set the communities up, what their design is, and then maybe a little bit about how your faculty are accessing them.
Sure. So what we wanted to do first was have a more of a global digital learning community where anyone, all things, related to online teaching and learning could come to this space. And so the digital learning community is really the core, the crux of our community,
Yeah.
where we ask, really just a lot of general questions. It can be anything, really. We have several categories that we've created to where we can kind of make that more organized. Like we'll have news and events, we'll have some articles and resource sharing and things like that, which I find very beneficial. But what we also want to do is expand that. So within the digital learning global community, we have like little sub communities. So a great example is we have a digital learning book club that we are currently implementing, and our executive director of online course production is leading it, and I'm a part of it too. I signed up for it, and it's been a great space to provide news and updates about when we're having our next session. But what I love most about it is that we can continue the conversation. We generally meet once every so often, and so just having that space where we can continue that conversation and continue to build a support network for our faculty, we're finding is very valuable.
That's awesome. And I love the idea of, mixing the sort of fun, lighthearted component of community in with the heavier stuff. That tends to, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of, it's easier to access, it sort of lowers the barrier for participation and adoption, which we know a lot of times it's just like that first post or that first engagement can be challenging, even for faculty. Sometimes, especially for faculty, getting out there and putting themselves out in front of their peers can be a little bit intimidating. So giving them an easy way to do that, I think, is such a smart idea of bringing them in and demonstrating the value of those spaces. So I
Yeah,
think
and
we're
I
going to,
think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, and I think too, like as you mentioned, we still have a long way to go, and so we're looking. We want to continue conversations as well. Especially, we have plenty of online events, so we're hoping that this can also be a place where it evolves, right? It grows and it becomes something where we didn't really expect at the beginning, right? Where it evolves naturally and grows.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have a question. Danielle,
Sure.
I forgot to introduce you at the beginning. I realized I'm doing everything out of order today. Um, so everyone, this is Danielle. She is my
I
colleague.
introduced myself in the chat. It's all good.
And I want you to know that she is very much empowered to make sure she's tracking your questions in the chat and interrupt us and bring them into the conversation. So Danielle, do we have some questions that we should touch on?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. So David, tell us about how you've communicated the launch of the community to your faculty members. Like, how do they know that this is a thing and where to access it?
Yeah, I think for starters, what we did was during our course production, we have a kickoff, kind of project that we do every semester with faculty. That was one way we send the message. We let them know through a presentation about our Inscribe community. We do send out a listserv that we have, and we'll invite them as well. We just kind of send them a brief introduction about what Inscribe is and what we're intending to do. So that helps. I think one of the things that we want to continue doing, though, is always announce it in anything that we do. So, for example, we do a lot of online events. We'll do like brown bag sessions where once in a while and every Fridays we'll have someone share something. And we're hoping to continually advertise that. So at the end, we can say, hey, we have an Inscribe community here. Please join, and we'll continue that conversation. So sometimes, like after a brown bag session, if a guest attendee says something that's really interesting, we might bring that into the Inscribe community to further, discuss and build that community. We also do a lot of other things. Like we do these one thing video shorts where we'll do a quick little video on something, and then we'll ask them, a question. We'll share the video, and then, hey, what do you all think about this? So like polling has been great. We've noticed that. Even just a simple prompt. What do you think about what David said in this video? Things like that have been very helpful.
And who is, I'm going to ask my own question. So one of the questions we often get is about community moderation and leadership. Yeah. So who on your team is the one kind of leading the charge, or the group of people that maybe are leading the charge in the community?
Well, we do have a team of moderators, which is great, but we also have faculty champions that are serving as moderators as well, which I feel is very important, so that we do have a faculty voice in that community that can relate to the experiences that some faculty might be going through in a classroom. And so we found that to be incredibly helpful. I think our goal, it's not that we want moderation, but we want to empower people to use this community to however you'd like, in the sense of share, ask questions, seek out professional growth. I think that's really important. So our view of moderation is probably more relaxed, because we want it to be an empowering place. I can understand if you were doing this for students, you might need more moderation, but I think for faculty, it's probably a little bit easier to manage in that regard.
Right. Just sort of leave it open for anybody to do what they want to do. And that kind of relates, Danielle, do you mind if I pull the question that came into Q&A?
Go for it.
I did not pop in, so I took a look. So I think this is related in the sense that, so the question is, what do you do to encourage participation in the community without having it seem like a burden or one more task they're required to do? Like, how do you encourage? And I feel like it's related to what you were talking about, but tell us, what are some of the tips you would give people, or what are some of the things you guys have been trying?
Well, one of the things that's been very easy is the seamless integration of Inscribe. So you can integrate it into your learning management system. One of the things that we do love is the single sign-on process. So in our communication, we tell faculty it's very easy. We give them the link, and all they have to do is sign in like they would if they were accessing a university system. So the ease of use, I think, is what we're trying to communicate. Like, it's not Twitter. You don't have to create an account, right? You don't have to go on Twitter and search for our group. It's all right there. And I think that to us, I think is a big benefit to getting faculty to come, is the ease of use and getting it set up.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think people can sometimes overlook that, because it's sort of obvious, but not, if it's not part of their workflow, if it's not integrated into the tools they're already using, it's really, number one, easy to forget about it. And then to the point of the question, that increases the burden, right? Like, now I got to go find this thing and figure out how to get into it and remember another password. Exactly. The other thing maybe you're going to touch on this, so I don't want to take away what you're going to talk about later. So I'm going to hold my thought, and then I'm going to bring it back up in a little bit about some of the other sort of benefits that people get from these community spaces. Anything else that we should touch on here, Danielle, before we jump ahead?
There's a question about analytics, but I think we'll cover that in the next couple of slides as well.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I think not just the single sign-on, but the opportunity to sort of place your community in multiple locations can be really beneficial to encouraging people to come in and participate. Okay, let's take a look at how some of the ways that people are using it. I'm trying to anything. So talk to us about just some examples of what you're seeing in the space.
Yeah, so this is a great example of someone that has a very specific, unique situation, right? About graduate student setup and training. And I think this is a great question, because I may not know the answer to the question, but somebody in our community does, right? And I think that's the beauty of this tool, is that not all of us are knowledge disseminators, but those that might have more knowledge on the topic can jump right in. So you see a response there, which I think is very helpful, knowing that I can't answer every question, but we have a community that can. And I think the more that we build the community, the more diversity we'll have. And I'm hoping that with these types of questions, it will serve a greater audience, and get those questions answered.
Yeah, and you can see this is the kind of question where if there's not a right answer, this is not like a correct answer. There's a,
Mhm.
share your experience and what different models there might be out there. And, somebody could mention something that you hadn't even thought of or considered. And so it's a great way to expand that knowledge for all the participants.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, let's take a look at another example. I don't know why it's giving me a hard time. There we go. Awesome. So
Yeah.
talk us through this
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is our main digital learning community, and we have a news and events feature. I think that's a really nice benefit of this is to advertise, right, to get your message across. And so as you can see here with news and events, you can see we've invited people to join us for our inaugural digital learning book club, and it's a great way at that level to really spread our message. Now we have multiple communication channels. We do newsletters, we'll do listserv emails, but what's great about this is that it's contained in this community. So you feel like you're part of the University of Tennessee family, which I love, right? It makes you feel like, oh, I'm being invited to this book club, by digital learning. And so it just creates that university connectedness a little bit better, right? Seeing that our logo up at the top of Inscribe right there versus University of Tennessee-Knoxville, just that feeling of a community, that this is part of it. So news and events is something we really want to continue to use because we're finding that it's a great way to spread our message,
Yeah.
regardless if we're using other communication channels, but this is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we certainly hear that, and we hear that a lot, and we never suggest only communicate through your community. We understand there's lots of different channels that serve different purposes, but we have heard, especially when talking about events that are coming up, that there's something about posting the events in the Inscribe community that drives higher levels of participation than they've ever gotten by just sending an email or posting it to a calendar. So I think to your point, it's like, I'm seeing this event posted in this community setting. I really feel like it's something that we're all going to be in together. And that drives people to be more interested or maybe feel more connected to that opportunity. So
Yeah.
we can explore later if you're seeing some of those numbers, but that's some of so anecdotally, that's just some of the things that we hear.
Yep.
And the branding, I think, is also key, right? You want to feel like this is part of the experience, an extension of the experience that you're already having. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that it just feels very synchronous with the stuff that's already on campus with the tools that you're already using.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we always want them to start a conversation too. So that's where you see on the tab, the last card on the right. We want this to be, hey, if you have a question, feel free, bring it up, and hopefully we can get that answered for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but tell us a little bit about how you use it as a communication channel.
Yeah. So we have a section called questions and conversations. And this is really that time for people to really kind of do that and share. And so you'll notice here with the views. So, this is quite a bit of views for us, like 108 for about the online GTA setup that you saw. That's a lot of views, right? A couple of likes here and there. In the card in the middle, we asked, what did you communicate regarding artificial intelligence this semester? Kind of getting that started, and especially with artificial intelligence, it's such a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
So getting that ball rolling, you notice there's 119 views. You notice we did some polling. We had a few people, we asked a question, a poll. And so even that little engagement helps. I think just asking a simple polling question, right? And maybe that will spark something, maybe that'll further the conversation. So that's one thing I do like about Inscribe is you can poll, but you can also have a conversation as well.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. And then, of course, like I said, the viewing to us is, we want to see more views. Do we want to see a ton of people interacting? Well, that's their choice, right? We can't really force that, but we're hoping that the views can help with that. Maybe that'll springboard them to maybe ask a question. Sometimes you just have to get comfortable. I tend to be a lurker in social media, if you know what I mean. And so I feel like we have to set that expectation that not everyone is going to, click on buttons and stuff. But at least if they're lurking, that might be a success too, right? Just a simple view.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is, I'm so glad that you brought this up because this is kind of where I was going a little bit earlier with the question around, how do you get people to find value and not feel like it's a burden? And I really am glad that you emphasized that idea that lurkers also benefit from these spaces. And I'm sure many of us are lurkers out there and have had this experience where, in social media or some other forum, you're not necessarily contributing, but what everyone else contributes, you learn a lot from, you feel a connection to. So you will see in your communities like this that participation curve is very similar to other virtual communities. You're going to have a small number of people that are really excited to get out there and be active and post all the time, and a much larger population who's really more about finding the value in consuming that and maybe, giving a thumbs up here or there. But don't discount that behavior model, because that actually suggests that it's working really, really well. I also love this slide because I think it gives this great example of the different types of conversation that you can have in a space like this. Everything from something very tactical and practical, who's using Turnitin? Does it actually work? They can't figure out how to log into that thing, to things that are much more theoretical or, based in teaching practice like AI, and what's the impact of that and how are you thinking about it in your community? And, both of those things have tremendous value, and I love being able to see them together in spaces like this. So let's look at, sounds like we had a question about analytics. Tell us a little bit about, how you're looking at the analytics, what you're wanting to see, maybe, how do you decide if this community is successful?
Yeah, so I think with this, we just pulled, this is a usage graph. You'll notice there's these peaks here. So whenever there's a peak, there's new content that's been generated. Now, what I'm not saying is that if you build it, they will come, but I feel that if you build it, they will at least see it, right? Or at least they will know that it's there. A great example is, I get notified whenever a new post happens, and it's through my email. And sometimes I'll go right to the post when I get that. So that's kind of an example, right? Like I'll get a new post and I'll go to it, I'll look through it. And that's when we're noticing that the peaks happen when we actually produce some content or get something in there. And so that's kind of what we're noticing. Does that mean that it's successful? Well, we're, that we still have to define what that means, right? We're still new. But I think what's successful is that we're at least getting people to come when we do create content. So knowing that is a springboard to something that we can further look into, and
Right.
hopefully we'll get more usage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is an important component of this experience, is when new content is being generated, you don't want people to have to come find it, right? Pushing that information out through notifications and alerts or onto the mobile app, so they can, well, one, you can kind of draw them back in, which is a little bit what you're seeing here. And also so they don't miss valuable things that are taking place among their peers and their other community members. Are you planning to do any surveys with the faculty to understand their perspective on the space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We haven't really thought about that yet, but that is something that we would probably explore in the future. Right now, I mean, to be honest with you, we're still piloting it. We're still figuring it out. We're still trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. But the more that we discover, the more that we practice using this tool, hopefully we'll get there. We'll be able to maybe generate a survey or a questionnaire about their thoughts. And if Inscribe has anything too, that'd be great. Resources.
Well, we
a
do, and I
shameless
think
plug, right?
to your point about wanting them to feel like they own the space and it belongs to them. Sometimes those surveys just give you great insights into small tweaks that you can make in the communities as well that can be really, really beneficial. Daniel, you mentioned that we had a question around the analytics. Did we cover it, or is there more that you want us to?
Yeah, so the question was in the same vein. Are there specific metrics or indicators used to measure the effectiveness and impact of digital communities on faculty satisfaction and student outcomes?
Yeah.
That
could be a research paper.
I know.
That's a good one.
Well, and I can say on the student side, what's often the sort of three measures that most institutions will use would be student success measures. So are you retaining more students? Are more students persisting, graduating? And then questions around sense of belonging. So I do think this would actually be a really interesting study to do with you, David, which would be, can we apply the belonging study that we've designed for students and bring that over to the faculty side?
That's a great
Because as
idea.
we all know, improving sense of belonging has all these other extended benefits, including for faculty in terms of job satisfaction and longevity and, you know, sense of connection and value to the institution. And then the third that a lot of people think about with students is just efficiency. You know, if I'm answering a question once, maybe I don't have to answer it, you know, 100 times to every student. I'm not sure how relevant that is in the faculty side, but those are 3 measures that other partners have looked at across that spectrum, which I definitely think we could, you know, use some version of that to look at faculty. Is faculty retention something that you guys are like thinking about, or is that something that hasn't really been a challenge for you at UT Knoxville?
You know, that's a great question. I'm probably a little too new at UTK to really give you that solid answer. But I think, you know, that's really up to the departments. We're just here to serve whoever's faculty, right? You know,
Yeah.
and so that really is a decision that we probably don't have a lot of control over. But knowing that we can only control what we can control. So
Yeah.
if we have new faculty coming in, or if you know, if we're not supporting that retention, you know, I'm sure we'll get that message will get across to us down the road. And I believe our executive director is here, and I think he sent a chat question or a message about that. So
Jason wants everyone to know that everyone wants to be at UT, and there
yeah,
are
there you
no
go.
challenges.
Well, there you go. No challenges here.
Well, I do know that there are other institutions where that is not the case. And so they're always thinking about ways that they can retain faculty in the same way that they're retaining students, because that hiring process, that onboarding process is expensive and complicated. But the community is also a great way to manage that onboarding as well. So when you do have a new person coming in, what a great way to welcome them into the fold by adding them to the community, giving them visibility into all their peers, see what everybody's thinking about and talking about. So I love that, that concept as well. Any other questions that have come in? I think my chat's not updating, so you'll have to tell me, Danielle, if I'm missing anyone.
We have a few that just came into the host directly. We touched on this a little bit, but beyond the initial implementation and the enthusiasm around the community, how do you sustain engagement and momentum long term?
That's a question we're continually asking ourselves, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm working with my colleague who's a manager of professional development, and you know, we're still asking that question today, right? How do we keep the momentum, right? But I think we have a great team of people that are really trying to make this happen. We have a focus group of people that are working with Inscribe just to kind of get those questions answered. I feel like our team does a great job, at least getting the message across. But in terms of everything else, we're just still trying to figure out how do we get that momentum? How do we continue this? I think the news and events will help. I think by, you know, saying, hey, we're having a brown bag session on this topic, you know, please join us, right? Even things like that, I think can, you know, are great starters, but there's so much to learn, right? That's the thing. And that's the journey, is you learn through the process. Sometimes it's through trial and error. Sometimes it's through great success stories, and sometimes it's not, right? You have to learn from those experiences. So we're getting there, to answer your question, but we're making strides. We're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right about the pairing of like live events with the ongoing asynchronous, you know, space to talk is a great way to keep people engaged. And, you know, since you're doing that work already and bringing the two together, I think is really, really smart.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Danielle?
Yes. What are some key factors to consider when designing and implementing a digital community for faculty?
Great question. Wow. These are great questions. No, those are all questions that we've had to ask ourselves. Repeat the question one more time, just so I make sure I answer it clearly.
Yeah, so can you provide some key factors to consider when designing and implementing the community?
So tips and tricks, I would say.
Yeah, tips and tricks. That's a good one. I would say the first thing is get a faculty member on board, a champion. I think that has helped us. I think because one, it's a different perspective. It's someone that's actually a faculty member that knows the needs of faculty, maybe more than we might know. And so I think having that is a great Kickstarter, getting other faculty involved, and also helping to moderate it as well is very helpful. I think another factor is time. just know that it's going to take time. It's not going to just happen overnight. You do have to really strategize and think about what it is you want to communicate and what are your expectations. I think that's really huge. If you're expecting everyone to, respond, comment, then you might not get that met. So you have to temper your expectations a little bit, depending on what you want to use it for. So doesn't necessarily for us have to be this, everyone has to reply and post, but at least it's something that they have the opportunity to do. And if we can create that safe space and model that, hopefully they'll do that. I think another tip, I guess, or anything is, like I said, temper your expectations, but find ways to communicate, know the limitations of that. It's very hard to communicate your message in higher education, as I mentioned. And so you really have to strategize your communication methods. Try multiple communication channels, I think, has been the way to go so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this earlier, the idea of it being a safe space.
Yeah.
Sometimes that just takes a little time to sink in, I guess is the way I would say that. And so momentum builds as your participants come to actually believe that and see that demonstrated, and then they get more comfortable with the space. And so,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not every community goes from 0 to 100 right away.
Exactly.
It can be like a little bit of a slow burn, but that tends to, when communities grow in that model, then you tend to have communities that have more longevity. If you go straight off, high really quickly, sometimes it's, not as sustainable, less sustainable actually, ironically in that context. So what's next? Where are you guys going with this, and what do you see coming in the future?
Well, I will say this, we are excited. We are really loving this community. I've seen just so much potential for it. And I think we all do at this point. Right now we've got about 95 approximately community members. We're hoping in the main community. So we're hoping to continue to expand that. And we have 21 members in the book club, which is great because it's already a small group. And so we're hoping to expand those communities, especially in our professional development offerings. We do offer a lot of professional development for faculty. We do asynchronous training through Canvas, the learning management system. We also do bisynchronous training, mix of, Zoom and asynchronous. And so we really want to expand that. So what we started to pilot is using Inscribe at that level, at the course level. So in Canvas, we create these training courses and then we implement the Inscribe community in the course. So then it feels like you're part of the course community with Inscribe. So what we're trying to do there is maybe dangle the carrot a little bit to get them eventually to come to our main community, right?
Right.
To at least say, hey, now you've seen the potential that Inscribe can do at this training level. Now that you're done with the training, now join our larger room and ask questions along the way. We don't want faculty to feel like it's a one and done thing, right? Like you've done this training, all right, see you later, right? We want them to continue that conversation. And so hopefully that will lead them there. So we're going to continue to implement that in our professional development offerings, especially during our live events as well. So we'll always mention, hey, we have our Inscribe community. And then hopefully within those live events, there might be a great question, a follow-up question, or something that could maybe further the conversation. So I think that's where our number one goal is, to really expand that in our professional development offerings. And so, like I said, we're piloting this with our training courses currently, and it's been going very well in terms of just getting our message across. We have some graduate students and postdoc students that we're working with that we've invited them to the community. So it's great that it's not just the faculty, but it's those that are in some kind of instructional capacity support, whether that's a teaching assistant, a graduate assistant, or a postdoc.
Oh, that's great. So like really broadening the perspective on who's going to benefit from these spaces and who can learn from them, which I love that concept. Yeah, and the idea that, it's what we all know this, right? It's one thing to learn something and feel like you understand it. It's totally different when you go to actually implement what you just learned, and all of a sudden there's all these questions that come up, or it doesn't feel quite right. And so I think the idea of those training courses is great, and I'm excited to explore with you, how those evolve over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I think another thing to add too, eventually, I think we're going to roll this out to academic programs and students in their programs. So we're hoping, what we would like to do is, once we know more about Inscribe and all of its uses and training, we'll then reach out to academic programs and units and offer like some little bit of training and let them know what Inscribe's about, to hopefully that they can implement that in their programs as well. So we're looking to expand as well,
Yeah,
just
and now
beyond our
they'll,
digital learning community.
right, they'll already know how the community works, how to use it, so
Right.
it becomes much easier then to implement it with their students down the line. That's really, really
Yeah.
smart. You're gonna have a whole ecosystem. I'm excited. Like, we'll do this
Yes.
again in a year, and we'll talk about that evolution and how much has changed and evolved over that time period.
Yeah, exactly.
Any last minute questions you want us to touch on, Danielle?
We don't have any questions at this point in time. However, we were hoping to keep this to 45 minutes. So if you want to roll into the closeout here, if I see any additional questions come in, I will jump in at the end. Sound good?
Thank you. Let me know. Okay, so thank you so much, David, for being here and sharing your journey. I think this is such an important topic. It's coming up all the time with our partners. And so I hope that the attendees here really learned something and maybe can bring that back to their own campuses and think about, different ways to engage your faculty and help them collaborate and support each other. So thank you so much for being here.